Mr. Burling's tone soon changes to a somewhat abrupt one when he says, "Well, what can I do for you? Some trouble about a warrant?" However, note the inspector's short, calm response. "No, Mr. Burling." This builds tension, and here we can see the opposition of both of the characters shown instantly. Priestley deliberately juxtaposes Mr. Burling and the inspector to emphasise the divide in their opinions. Mr. Burling is a strong capitalist, and the inspector believes in socialism. Note the stage directions after a pause with a touch of impatience. "Well, what is it then?" Here we can see that he has a smug attitude, that he is superior to the inspector because of class differences. Note how the inspector is again not fazed. "I'd like some information, if you don't mind, Mr. Burling. 2 hours ago, a young woman died in the infirmary. She'd been taken there this afternoon because she'd swallowed a lot of strong disinfectant. Burnt her inside out, of course." Here we can see that he is direct. He's very frank and uses flippant, matter-of-fact, sometimes brutal imagery. "Burnt her inside out, of course." Note Eric's response. "My God!" Here we can see the distinction between Eric's reaction and his father's reaction. It's also important because his profanity emphasises his lavish lifestyle and corruption. The inspector then responds with, "Yes, she was in great agony. They did everything they could for her at the infirmary, but she died. Suicide, of course." Again note his matter-of-fact tone and the brutal imagery that he uses to describe her death. Here, this is deliberately used for shock factor, to shock the audience and the characters. Now note Burling's reaction in comparison to Eric's. Rather impatiently, according to the stage directions. "Yes, yes, horrid business, but I don't understand why you should come here, Inspector." His tone is unfeeling and emphasises his selfish nature. The repetition emphasises his dismissive attitude, and he is portrayed as a cold, callous man. Note the stage directions for the inspector, cutting through massively. This implies that he is in a hurry. In fact, the whole way throughout the play, he seems to be in a hurry, with time and his preoccupation with it being a massive factor. This suggests that Priestley is using the inspector as a plot device to drive the plot of the play forward. We can see, though, that it also lets us know he is in charge, in control, and he is not intimidated by Burling, despite the fact that he is attempting to throw his weight around by emphasising his status and therefore supposed superiority. "I've been round to the room she had, and she'd left a letter there, and a sort of diary. Like a lot of these young women who get into various kinds of trouble, she'd used more than one name. But her original name, her real name, was Eva Smith." Here we can see, through the simile, like a lot of these young women who get into various kinds of trouble, the euphemism, suggesting that she has perhaps resorted to prostitution or some sort of horrible last resort. Also note her name, Eva Smith. This suggests that it is not really a real name, but rather she is a metaphor for all working classes. This would have been a common surname at the time, and suggests that actually what happens in the Burling home, including their involvement with Eva, is a microcosm for society. He uses the family and their role in her suicide to emphasise the fact that there is a need for massive social reform. Here it is obvious that he is concerned for social and moral responsibility. Note the stage directions slowly. "No, I seem to remember hearing that name, Eva Smith, somewhere, but it doesn't convey anything to me, and I don't see where I come into this." The stage directions indicate that he does actually remember. It's also important because she is just a means to an end for him, emphasising the fact that he will not accept responsibility. Note his flippant, casual denial of responsibility when he says, "Oh, that's it, is it? Well, we've several hundred young women there, you know, and they keep changing," again emphasising his capitalist nature. This young woman, Eva Smith, was a bit out of the ordinary. I found a photograph of her in her lodgings. Perhaps you'd remember her from that. Note the inspector's tactic here. The prop adds to the tension and the mystery as the audience is kept out of the loop and does not know what this picture looks like. He takes a photograph, about a postcard size, out of his pocket and goes to Burling. Both Gerald and Eric rise to have a look at the photograph, but the inspector interposes himself between them and the photograph. Here, the staging also emphasises the tension on stage as well. Not just the tension and mystery for the audience, but the mystery for Gerald and Eric, who also cannot see the photograph. Also note that they are surprised and rather annoyed. Burling stares hard and with recognition at the photograph, which the inspector then replaces in his pocket. Note the class issues here. These gentlemen are not used to not getting their own way. They're not used to being challenged in any way. Therefore, when the inspector does not let them see the photograph, they feel challenged. Note Gerald's reaction. Note the stage directions showing annoyance. Any particular reason why I shouldn't see this girl's photograph, Inspector? Then note the inspector coolly looking hard at him. There might be. Here he is portrayed as quite intimidating. This is quite ominous, and we can see that there is proleptic irony again being used. That is anticipated irony. The audience can anticipate that both Eric and Gerald are involved, because Eric says, "And the same applies to me, I suppose."